Marker. And action.
This is Behind the Bells, the show that takes you behind the magic of your favorite Christmas movies and shows. Within the background of every Santa Claus, reindeer, and stocking is a story. Where did it come from? Our Christmas movie expert will unravel all of that and give you the full story. Sit back and enjoy another episode with Robert Nicholas.
Merry Monday, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bells. I'm your host, Robert Nicholas, and I'll be taking you on another one-horse open sleigh ride into the world of Christmas movies. Now I know what you're thinking. The Haunted Mansion in February? What could this possibly have to do with Christmas or anything related to your podcast? Well, I'll admit it, the connection is a bit loose. Okay, very loose in fact. But trust me, it's there. And as we ease into the lingering chill of winter, I wanted to do something special to kick off the fourth season of our show. And yes, I promise there'll be more episodes this year than last. This episode also ties in with my last deep dive, our look at Frosty the Snowman, the Rankin Bass Holiday Special. There may not be any snowmen here, or at least not most of the year, but one of Frosty's key voices has an unexpected link to today's topic. Consider this a 6 degrees of separation kind of episode, where one nostalgic figure leads us into another beloved piece of Disney history. So today, we're stepping away from movies to pay tribute to something that has been near and dear to me since childhood. This takes me back to the days when Disneyland still had annual passes, something I'm still really salty about losing. Walking through the park, past the adventurous thrills of Indiana Jones, the swashbuckling worlds of Pirates of the Caribbean, and the scenic rivers of America, you eventually find yourself at the doorstop of a grand Gothic revival mansion. This house just isn't any house. It's home to 999 happy haunts waiting for you into their world, not to terrorize, but to entertain with a frightful delight. This is the Haunted Mansion. Keep your hands and arms inside the Doom Buggy at all times. Let's go for a ride.
When hinges creak in doorless chambers, and strange and frightening sounds echo through the halls, whenever candlelights flicker, where the air is deathly still, that is the time when ghosts are present, practicing their terror with ghoulish delight.
These are the first lines you hear from the constantly heard but never seen ghost host. He's the one to guide you into the stretching room before making your way to the loading platform and onto a doom buggy. He also happens to be played by Paul Frees. Paul Frees was also in Frosty the Snowman, in which he plays Santa Claus. I realized as well that I failed to note that he also played a variety of characters in the special. He was also the traffic cop that Frosty encounters, the ticket taker at the train station, and did the sounds of Professor Hinkle's rabbit, Hocus Pocus. So yeah, this guy's got quite the range. This may be because he has the nickname, the Man of 1,000 Voices, even though Mel Blanc, the voice behind a lot of the Looney Tunes characters, also has that nickname. But if 1,000 guys can have the same nickname like Spike, Dash, or Butch, who says that one can't stake a claim on the Man of 1,000 Voices? Paul Frees is no stranger to the work of Rankin Bass. He was also the sea captain in Cricket on the Hearth, Captain Jones in The Mouse and the Mayflower, and Aaron's father in The Little Drummer Boy.
Father! Mother!
And why this exceptional greeting today, my son?
Oh, no reason.
Happy birthday, Aaron.
Oh, Father! Mother! Did you bring me something?
I don't suppose this would interest you, young man?
A drum! My very own drum! Oh, Father!
Try it out, Aaron.
And perhaps because it was a gift of love, the drum had an almost magical quality.
And these are just a few of the roles that he did before Frosty. He was also a prominent voice in a lot of Jay Ward productions, including Boris Badenoff in Rocky and Bullwinkle, and Inspector Fenwick in Dudley Do-Right.
So guess now who's going to be the new Santa Claus?
Oh, not you, Boris.
You're not just whistling Ochicharny, huh?
But for badness sake, why?
Use your head, Natasha. Just think. First, I get to wear big white beard. In disguise, no?
I guess.
Then, on Christmas Eve, I start out in bulletproof sleigh and visit everybody's house. Down the chimney I go and... Ho, ho, ho! Stick him up! And for the first time in history, Santa Claus carries presents up the chimney instead of down.
Oh, marvelous, darling.
But if you're a big Disney fan, then chances are you know a lot about Paul Frees's extensive work with Disney. He was the original voice of Ludwig von Drake, one of Donald Duck's uncles, who was also leading as professor to many of the educational segments on The Wonderful World of Color. So you might remember him singing about the various colors within the Spectrum song, teaching about child psychology, giving lessons on spaceflight, or on the dances from Spain. But he was also prominent within the theme park space within a lot of attractions at Disneyland, including Adventures Through Inner Space, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and Pirates of the Caribbean.
I am the first person to make this fabulous journey. Suspended in the timelessness of inner space are the thought waves of my first impressions. They will be our only source of contact once you have passed beyond the limits of normal magnification.
Weigh anchor now, ye swabbies. What be I offered for this winsome wench? Stout-hearted and corn-fed she be.
Hey, be it stouter by the pound?
Shift your cargo, dearie. Show 'em your larboard side.
This was the American dream, the prayer for the future. But that golden goal was not to be had without cost.
But his role as the ghost host on the Haunted Mansion is what people tend to remember him the most. So much so that when the attraction changes over to its Nightmare Before Christmas themed overlay, the Haunted Mansion Holiday, our new ghost host, played by Corey Burton, does a pretty solid Paul Frees impression. So yeah, I'd easily argue that the attraction is as much as Paul Frees's as it is the Imagineers who created the spirited attraction. Why do I call this spirited rather than scary? That's because many of the Imagineers who would work on it, including Ken Anderson, Raleigh Crump, and Neil Gracie, had a hard time trying to figure out whether to make the experience scary or funny. Today, the combination of both can easily be found in a lot of spooky stories. Even The Nightmare Before Christmas relishes in that atmosphere, making its seasonal overlay an easy combination. But for the 1960s, this hadn't been done at a theme park before. Spook houses have been around since amusement parks got their start. They were even dark rides, but nothing on the level that the Haunted Mansion would be. Much of those rides would be in total darkness, with an occasional set piece like a guillotine, or a Dracula figurine popping out. Noises were a tool in getting a fright out of the guest. Just like what I did now. But these were done on a small budget. These kinds of spook house rides were also cheap to install and tended to be a staple at a lot of fairs, carnivals, and circuses. If something was going to happen at Disneyland, standard was something that they would not go for. No, this haunted experience was really going to take you through a real house, or at least one that a ride vehicle can traverse through. But even that wasn't even in the cards in the beginning. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. Let's talk about the history of the Haunted Mansion and get a good look at how something spooky ties back to some of the earliest days at Disney, even before Disneyland was even an idea. What you're hearing is from the original Silly Symphony, The Skeleton Dance from 1929, coming out less than a year after Steamboat Willie the first Mickey sound short. This should be an indication that Disney had never been shy about producing macabre content. That same year, we'd even see Mickey going into a haunted mansion in a short called The Haunted House that would even be released during the holiday season. What I'm getting at is that there was a passion from the animators that loved producing darker content in addition to the classic shorts featuring Mickey and the gang. You can see a lot more of Disney taking a path into the spooky side within the Mad Doctor, Hell's Bells, and the Old Mill. The Old Mill in general is where I can start to see the Haunted Mansion seeds starting to plant. The simple story of a group of animals seeking shelter from a storm in an abandoned windmill also gives the spooky tone that the attraction would be famous for. Maybe not as intense as the Silly Symphony, but its atmosphere, which would be carried into the darker moments of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, bestows a sense of dread and uncertainty. When Walt Disney first wanted to build a theme park, he initially was planning for a small 16-acre park called Mickey Mouse Park in Burbank. Within this park, they were already considering a place within a Main Street-like area to house a church, a graveyard, and a rundown house that would have been on a hill to be seen by the guests. Little is known other than a concept sketch drawn by Harper Goff, who was an in-house art director who would end up working on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then later Fantastic Voyage and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This quote-unquote Mickey Mouse Park, of course, never happened, as the idea for Walt's theme park grew way too grand for its initial spot in Burbank. It would be around the late 50s when the idea of a haunted house was brought back to the table. Now that Disneyland had operated for a couple of years and nothing was stopping Walt from his ideas, he wanted to add a New Orleans themed land within the southwestern area of the park, serving as a companion to Adventureland and Frontierland. This was where he wanted his haunted house. He assigned Imagineer Ken Anderson to create the attraction's story using the design from Goff as a starting point. Anderson was long named Walt's quote-unquote jack of all trades, having first started as an animator on Snow White, Pinocchio, Song of the South, all the way up to Cinderella until he moved over into Imagineering, in which he designed a majority of the dark rides in Fantasyland. What he would create after researching the architecture of New Orleans would be an antebellum style manor inspired both by the Shirley Lydecker home in Baltimore and the Winchester house in San Jose, California. By the early 60s, the Haunted Mansion was still envisioned as a walkthrough. Pirates of the Caribbean was like this as well, in which people would navigate a path as people were shown one figure after the other. In fact, the exterior of the original mansion in California would be built in 1963, but would hit a halt at that point. New Orleans Square was still being built, but Walt's attention was on the 1964 World's Fair in New York. Disney Imagineering had commissioned 4 attractions for the fair that included the Carousel of Progress, Ford's Magic Skyway, It's a Small World, and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. The fair itself went through a lot of controversy that would take way too long to go into. But Walt Disney came out a winner, as his contributions proved to be big game changers. His Magic Skyway evolved the idea of a people mover style system that would spearhead the Omni-Mover, a continuously moving attraction that could be rotated at any angle. It's a Small World crafted elaborate set pieces that set the stage for bigger and better dark rides, way more so than the smaller attractions in Fantasyland. But the biggest came from both the Carousel of Progress and Mr. Lincoln, with the most sophisticated audio animatronics debuting for the first time. The days of wax figures were over, as Disney can now bring anything to life. The 16th President, pirates, and ironically, ghosts. Various Imagineers had also joined onto the Haunted Mansion project, including Yale Gracie, Wally Crump, Claude Coates, Mark Davis, and Xavier Atencio. They all contributed more ideas that could be utilized by the new technology of animatronics. Many of the ghosts we know including Madame Leota, the dueling ghosts, a body trying to escape a coffin, a bizarre grandfather clock, suits of armor, and even the ghostly ballroom dancers were all conceived here. The attraction had excited Walt Disney enough that he even included some of the attraction elements in an episode of The Wonderful World of Color.
And Mark Davis is the master in charge of our House of Illusions, or what do we call it?
A Haunted Mansion.
Haunted Mansion and Supernatural.
Oh, lots
Can
of
you give me a little
supernatural.
idea what we're going to have in there?
Yes, well, we're doing a lot of portraits that change right in front of your very eyes. As a matter of fact, one of our paintings here is based on Greek mythology. This is Medusa, is a very beautiful girl. She offended the goddess Athena, and as a result, Athena turned her into a gorgon. And as you may know, if you looked at a gorgon would turn you into stone.
Well, we sure don't want that to happen. What is, tell her about this thing here, will you, Mark?
Well, this is our elongating, stretching room. And in this room, we also have some stretching portraits. Perhaps you'd like to look at those over there. These are some that we're
You pull them down. You should see what happens when the room gets longer. You get this full-size portrait.
Imagineering had always wanted to utilize the Pepper's Ghost effect in the attraction and crafted a ballroom set inspired by the one from the Winchester House. I bet you're wondering though, what is a ghost pepper effect? Well, if you've seen the images of the Haunted Mansion dancing ghosts and wanted to know how they pull off such a seamlessly transparency, then you may or may not notice that there's a large panel of glass in front of you. The ghosts are a reflection of the real animatronics just below you. The low lighting in the ballroom, in addition to the careful lighting on the ghosts, gives us a true swinging wake. If the house lights were turned on all the way, the reflections wouldn't be seen and the ghosts would be gone. So there were a lot of new effects and ghosts that were being developed for the Haunted Mansion, but the house itself was still empty, as Imagineering didn't want the attraction to be a walkthrough anymore, but rather a ride. It wouldn't be until 1967, in which Walt Disney was no longer around, that this would be changed into that. Walt had already agreed to make Pirates of the Caribbean into a boat ride, and was looking for something similar for the Haunted Mansion. The solution came from Tomorrowland from a newly opened dark ride called Adventure Through Inner Space. The Monsanto-sponsored attraction educated guests by shrinking them to atomic size to take them inside a snowflake and show them water molecules before shrinking them further into the size of an atom. The ride was also the first to utilize the new Omnimover system, which not only made the system and ride vehicles consistently moving, but it also gave control on what each ride vehicle and its guests could see in their line of vision. Of course, Adventure Through Inner Space was more abstract and would ironically be darker than the actual Haunted Mansion. This is a way of saying that the Haunted Mansion was shaping up to be a very elaborate and expensive experience. Something like that just was not going to fit into the house that was already built. To house the experience, they had to build a brand new show building that would of course be hidden from public view. That would mean having to transport guests into the backstage area, which would be done by turning the stretching room into a functioning elevator. Once the portraits were stretched and the shriek of a ghost was heard, a gallery camouflaged the direction that the guests were really going. They weren't in the house that they had been staring at while they were waiting. They were being ushered into another building that really had the ride. Now that the Haunted Mansion was going to be a slow-moving ride, the story had to be created on how and why the guests would be going into a haunted house. Part of that would depend on what kind of experience that it was going to be. Part of the problem was that several designers disagreed with whether the attraction was supposed to be scary or silly. Disneyland may have been about transporting people to fantasy worlds unseen, but it was still a primarily family-oriented park. They couldn't just make some of the most terrifying imagery and not consider the children. They couldn't steer too close to the comedic atmosphere either. It had to feel scary, but also inviting. Imagineer Xavier Atencio found a compromise by cultivating a spirited atmosphere in the story. We the people would be visiting the mansion to see the 999 happy haunts that live there. The house itself on the outside's in good shape, even with the outdoor graveyard and the overgrown greenery. but it's when we get to the front that we would start to hear the sounds of an organ. We would be led to a lobby that doesn't just look old, but feels old. The wallpaper looks aged, we see dust on the candelabra, we even hear a voice that reveals itself as the ghost host, played by Paul Frees. All this is cultivating a false tone to weed out the ones that may already feel too scared to experience this. It also serves as a dare for the more intrigued guests on what awaits further. For those that do proceed and survive the stretching room fine, the staff of the mansion, played by cast members that would act as our servants, would lead us onto the Omnimover system, now called Doom Buggies. We're taken on a tour of the house, but as the Doom Buggy keeps us secure, it also ensures that we have no power on our own to move. We see what the Imagineers want us to see. The beginning of the Haunted Mansion would take us through its spookiest material first, traversing through a hallway of doors that may house something dangerous on the other side. But it's not until we see Madame Leota that we meet our first ghost, this fortune teller who only seems to exist within a crystal ball as she's looking for more spirits to come forth.
Serpents and spiders, tail of a rat, call in the spirits wherever they're at. Rap on a table, it's time to respond. Send us a message from somewhere beyond. Goblins and ghoulies from last Halloween, awaken the spirits with your tambourine. Creepies and crawlies, toads.
Does she sound familiar? Madame Leota would be voiced by Eleanor Audley, who was also a Disney villain. Twice. She would be Lady Tremaine in Cinderella and Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty. This would also be our first sign that we shouldn't have to worry. Leota's parlor may be the darkest room in the mansion, but it's also an indication that she's not looking to harm us, but to show us her power. Maybe even that she's the one summoning random sounds through the house. From the parlor, we would be led upstairs to get a view of the ballroom, which really shows off the capabilities of Disney Imagineering. Every figure here is a ghost, and yet they're not trying to scare us, but just having their own party, a swinging wake. They're eating cake at a table, they're dancing, they're flying around, they're playing music, and more seem to be arriving for the occasion. This is where I see the mansion's silly side start to come in, as many of the ghosts are more focused on having fun rather than trying to take our souls. They just want to do what we people are doing now, having fun. As we're led to the attic, things become dark again as we hear constant voices shouting, "I do!" as we hear some piano music played like a march. This march, of course, is a bridal march in minor key as we see a ghostly bride. Is she waiting for her long-lost love? Her beating heart may say so, even though we hear plenty of ghost suitors that are willing to give their own. Through an attic window, we're then thrown into the biggest showstopper scene of the attraction, the graveyard. We get more of the swinging wake as we now see the place is full of ghosts. Not pepper ghosts, but full animatronics that are just here to have a good time. With the exception of the one human we see, a caretaker and his frightened dog, the ghosts are celebrating the joys of being a spirit. None of them are lost or looking to move on. They know that they're dead, and embrace the fact that there are at least 999 haunts together. From ghosts on bikes, to a mummy, to an ethereal band, and even random ones like sailors and opera singers, this house is a beacon of never-ending spirits. As being led by a group of singing stone busts, we hear the attraction's theme, Grim Grinning Ghosts. The music was composed by Buddy Baker, and the lyrics were written by Xavier Atencio, and is honestly one of the catchiest songs to come from Disney. The song itself reflects the joyous nature that the ghosts are having. They're spooky, but they're only playing around. They're inviting you to join and socialize. This clarifies that the Haunted Mansion isn't really trying to scare you, but rather give you a creepy atmosphere to have fun in. We then finally head into a mausoleum where our ghost host has one more surprise. We find a final set of ghosts, and probably the most famous, as they're on the poster of the attraction, the hitchhiking ghosts. We're warned to avoid the hitchhikers, but with the path the Doom Boogies take, we have no choice. We then get a second Pepper's Ghost effect, in which we see the mirrors and one of the three hitchhikers sitting in the middle. This is done by a clever use of the one-way mirror on our side while the ghosts are behind it. With the correct low lighting, we see a ghost. We're told they'll follow us home before we make our way to the exit. The layout of the Haunted Mansion reflects not just the brilliance of storytelling from Imagineering, but also how the right speed and idiosyncratic vehicles build up to create a spirited atmosphere that they wanted to give. Because the exterior of the Haunted Mansion stood standing for years before it opened, there were rumors that the attraction was too scary and needed to be toned down. That it somehow opened up in the early 60s before closing due to the heart attacks that it gave the guests? If you've been listening to the time frame of them working on it and the planned layout, it's easy to see that this rumor is completely unfounded. The attraction would keep the tone that it always built up to when it opened for good. There was never any super creepy figures or jump scares that would frighten the socks off of anybody. So, how did the rumor of it being too scary begin? Honestly, who knows? Maybe from park guests who saw the Haunted Mansion for nearly a decade before opening and thought there was a conspiracy Disney was trying to hide? Or maybe the rumor was spread by a cast member who hoped that the quote-unquote heart attack-inducing fears would create some kind of suspense and intrigue to get them to visit once it did open. We're going to take a short break, but we will be back with more information about the Haunted Mansion and the movie adaptations shortly.
Hello, this is Art from A Cozy Christmas Podcast. We're the podcast that explores the coziest stories and memories of Christmas. Join me as I invite you to listen in as I read some of the classic stories of Christmas. Stories like The Gift of the Magi or A Christmas Carol, among many others you may not have heard of before. Sometimes I'll have a guest on and we'll talk about Christmas and the stories that matter to them, like the stories of their favorite Christmas memories and traditions. Sometimes I'm joined by my favorite co-host, my daughter Grace, and we'll talk about and try different Christmas foods, play games, or chat about our favorite Christmas movies and traditions. And also teddy bears. So come on in, make yourself at home, and enjoy all the cozy Christmas stories and more heard here at the Cozy Christmas Podcast. You can find out more at www.cozychristmaspodcast.com.
And now back to the show with our Christmas movie expert, Robert Nicholas.
The Haunted Mansion would welcome its first guests on August 12, 1969, where it was an immediate hit. It became a part of the park's identity, fitting in perfectly within the New Orleans Square area, creating something that was now a rite of passage. Okay, maybe not so much for older kids, but for the younger ones who had never been in a haunted house before. For many, this would be their first step into the more macabre side of Disney, at least one that you can experience in person. I can't tell you how many times I would visit the attraction as an adult, during which I was guaranteed to hear at least one child develop some anxiety tears even before they stepped inside the house. And yes, the stretching room and ominous tone before had forced some through an early exit, dubbed the chicken exit. But for those brave kids that got into the Doom Buggies and stuck it out, most would come to find, well, not a threatening presence, but a spirited one. Exactly what the Imagineers had intended. It was like being let in on the joke and the children realizing that the trick was on them. They thought they were going to encounter something scary, only to find the ghosts in the house itself was more silly. It was the kind of spooky that Disney had wanted to present. The ride was popular enough that each park had its own version of it, though none of them were copies of the one in Anaheim. In Orlando, the Magic Kingdom would receive one as an opening day attraction in its Liberty Square area, though instead of a plantation house, it would be more of a Gothic revival house similar to something you'd see in the Upper East Coast area. The attraction would contain a lot of the same elements, but also came with some new parts, such as an endless staircase and a library. Tokyo would also get it as an opening day attraction in its Fantasyland area, being mostly the same as the Walt Disney World version from Florida. The other Haunted Mansions would actually have some unique twists. In Paris, they would get a Haunted Mansion-like attraction called the Phantom Manor in its Frontierland section. It's here in which a more elaborate story was created to tie the house and its residents with the nearby Thunder Mountain attraction. While the short version of it, a settler who struck gold built the house for him and his family, starting the company that continues to dig in Thunder Mountain. The daughter grows up and has various suitors that all wish to take her away from the house. The men are stopped by her father, who ends up being killed in an earthquake, said to be responsible by the spirit of a thunderbird. When her fiancé on her wedding day is lured to his death by a phantom in the house, she loses her mind, endlessly waiting for him. This sets the stage for a more Western-based haunted house. This also ironically made the attraction more American than the ones within the California and the Florida park. But even with all the criticism that Disneyland Paris, then called Euro Disneyland, received, the Phantom Manor was praised as both unique and taking the Haunted Mansion to a new level thanks to its story. I've only been able to experience it with YouTube ride-throughs, so I really can't say I've truly experienced it. But from what I did see, the Phantom Manor does well at making its Haunted Mansion its own thing. After all, I think this may be the only one that has zombies. The ride is in both French and English, but because the attraction relies on its atmosphere and visual storytelling, it's easy to grasp its story. Oh, and the English narration was done by Vincent Price, in which you Disney nerds may remember him as Professor Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective. There's plenty of POV videos on the Phantom Manor on YouTube, so I'd say check out some of them there to see how it compares to its American counterparts. I won't go as far to say that it's better, but it feels like a new attraction enough that makes it a welcome addition to its Frontierland. The Phantom Manor is just as spirited. Now, what about the other parks in Asia? Hong Kong Disneyland's version had to go the extra step, as cultural differences weren't as accepting of ghost stories or the afterlife. This is the Mystic Manor within their Adventureland. This may as well be a new attraction entirely. Nothing about Gracie Manor nor anything haunting is attributed. Now the mansion is a Queen Anne style with a story about an explorer named Henry Mystic and his collection of artifacts. This also makes him a member of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. This is a newer element of the parks, meant to tie in the attractions together to make them mostly connected. I have no clue this also includes the other older rides at the other parks, but it's a nice touch to give more synergy to the magic. Anyway, the attraction also uses a quote-unquote trackless system, doing away with the Omnimover. While it's still technically a dark ride, the attractions can now move and sway like how a motion simulator does. Think like the Indiana Jones adventure at Disneyland on a smaller scale and without an obvious track guiding the vehicles. This kind of system has been advanced and engineered for other, bigger attractions, such as Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad and the new Star Wars attraction, Rise of Resistance. But I bet you're wondering without the ghosts, how does Mystic Manor fill in for Hong Kong's Haunted Mansion? A new story is created in which Henry's pet monkey Albert finds a music box that accidentally unleashes something magical, giving life to inanimate objects. I don't know why this isn't seen as more spiritual than ghosts, but if no one is asking questions, then I shouldn't either. This does allow for plenty of tributes to the Haunted Mansion, including musical instruments playing on their own, portraits coming to life, and a conservatory. Macabre is not a word I would use for this experience. This was built as a tamer, more family-friendly ride that has a scare or two. but its tone is so different from that of the Haunted Mansion that it hardly justifies being in the same category. Though, is it fun? From the videos I've seen, I think so. It feels like an Adventureland ride that could fit within California. If anything, I could even see this tying in with the Jungle Cruise or the Indiana Jones adventure with a little bit of rewriting. Mystic Manor is also a rare Disney attraction that's not tied to one of their IP or intellectual property. It's an original story with characters that could fit in finely with the other original characters made for the parks. Though the attraction was made for Hong Kong and a Chinese audience, the majority of the attraction is in English, which makes it an easy experience for Westerners. Unless you've been to the resort, the only way you're going to see it is to watch the various POV videos on YouTube. You might even consider downloading its music, which was crafted by Danny Elfman. But after seeing it, it's easy to see why Mystic Manor is praised by Disney fans. It writes its own definition on Spirited without offending its own audience, but it also gives something new for those that have seen the other Haunted Mansions around the world. So with a mansion in different lands at each park, does this mean that whoever gets Disneyland next will have to build theirs in Tomorrowland? I don't know, but I would love to see a sci-fi version of that at some point. As Behind the Bells is a movie-based podcast, I'm sure you're wondering what I think of the Haunted Mansion movies. I'll admit that out of the other movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Jungle Cruise, and even The Country Bears, the Haunted Mansion has had the most potential to work in the big screen. The attraction already has a fantastical house as a location, and tons of ghosts that would be interesting to dwell more into. The hitchhiking ghosts, the bride in the attic, Madame Leota, the dueling ghost, the opera singer, the mummy, the hatbox ghost, the dancing ghost, the singing busts. I could go on with how much I would love to see them as characters in a bigger Haunted Mansion story. We would first get the Haunted Mansion in 2003, directed by Rob Minkoff, who has had his hand in Disney animation, including The Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective, The Little Mermaid, and even co-directing The Lion King. The Haunted Mansion script was even written by someone I previously covered on my Elf episodes, David Birnenbaum.
This is the ancestral mansion of the Gracie family. It's a real fixer-upper. With a Victorian ballroom, secret passageways, spacious grounds with room for the whole family, and a mystery that has cursed the house for over 100 years. But no one told the Evers family.
Honey, you know they have dead people in the backyard. Hey, I'd really rather stay on the ground. Can I stay on the ground, please?
Dark spirits from the grave, come forth.
Don't you make no dark spirits come out while I'm sitting there. Wait till I leave before the dark spirits come out.
The Haunted Mansion.
The result would be a very mixed bag. Part of the problem, as the trailers give away, is that the Haunted Mansion was made in mind as an Eddie Murphy vehicle. And don't get me wrong, I think that Eddie Murphy is an amazing talent and can be immensely funny. But this was made during in which his family movies like Shrek, Mulan, and Daddy Daycare were hits, so this was an attempt to cash in on that phenomena. When Eddie has to dial back his material for a script that relies on him leading a mystery about the mansion, it results in a lot of unfunny moments. It's not that he isn't trying, but even when they try to make him a realtor who's too busy with his family, he has little to work with other than having him react to the mansion and its spirits. Aside from Madame Leota, played by Jennifer Tilly, and the butler Ramsley, played by Terrence Stamp, there really isn't a lot focused on the other ghosts. Much of the Haunted Mansion is on him and his family. It's really about an everyman that encounters the mansion. But why doesn't it work like how it did work for Will Turner as an everyman in Pirates of the Caribbean? Well, in addition to having him be the straight man to Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow, that movie at least gave you plenty of time with the other pirates, while dealing with an interesting story that managed to tie in elements from the ride. Eddie might have benefited had he been paired with some other ghosts that were featured in the attraction, rather than some random unfunny ones played by Wallace Shawn and Dina Spivey. And it doesn't help that Jennifer Tilly seems like a major miscast as the fortune teller. The best parts of the Haunted Mansion come when you do get to see more of the house and the ghosts. I like that it incorporates elements of the Disneyland and Disney World attractions while making it more like a house that was lived in. There is a passion for the attraction when you see moments like Eddie Murphy in the hallway with the breathing doors, or in the graveyard when we get to see a lot of the ghosts we remember. But there's too little of that to make up for that. I can say I was disappointed when I first saw this, as much as I tried to convince myself it was good. I thought I was going to get a spookier movie, but the Haunted Mansion plays itself way too safe by sticking with the family for the majority of the story. It failed to balance the scales enough to please most fans, but I am reading that it is gaining a cult status among the young children that saw this when it was released. So perhaps there was a crowd that liked it enough that it'll just become another hocus pocus for Disney. Having seen it again more recently, it's not as bad as I remember, but I can't go as far to say that my mind has changed. I probably would have liked it more had it balanced its spooky atmosphere with comedy better. Think Beetlejuice, Ghostbusters, even maybe Paranorman. But as is, it's more forgettable than bad. Then in 2023, we would get a new Haunted Mansion film directed by Justin Simien, who also made Dear White People and Bad Hair. Movies I can honestly say I haven't seen. The script was penned by Katie Dippold, who also wrote episodes in Parks and Recreation. She also wrote the screenplays of The Heat, Spy, and the 2016 Ghostbusters.
Welcome home. I know this place isn't as warm as I'd hoped, but I'm going to light a vanilla candle, and it's going to be a game changer.
Will it though?
We're out.
This mansion is unhinged. She needs all the help she can get. You want to be a hero?
Pass.
$2,000.
What's the address?
I'm gonna move into a house without windows, so I won't see you walking by.
Guys? Little help?
With your new
I just saw that.
This house has a way of playing tricks on you.
I should note that a reboot had been in the works for a while at Disney, with Guillermo del Toro writing a new script. He announced it as far back as 2010 and said he wanted to make it genuinely scary. I'm guessing that it was too scary as that movie would never happen. All that was revealed was that the Hatbox Ghost would play a crucial role. I would love to get my hands on that at some point, as I would love to see how that eventually became this new Haunted Mansion story. Again, the movie would be about a group of people, including Lakeith Stanfield, Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, and Rosario Dawson, that are drawn to the mansion to help the spirits. Because the movie actually includes a reference from this line to the attraction,
And a ghost will follow you home.
this forces our people to be at the mansion for most of the story. We get encounters with Madame Leota, now played by Jamie Lee Curtis, and the Hatbox Ghost, played by Jared Leto. Much of the plot centers around helping the ghost from an evil spirit and how they need to navigate the house to stop it. This does give us a chance to see a lot more of the house, which was designed to be a little closer to the style featured in the ride rather than from the 2003 movie. We even get a scene where Tiffany Haddish is forced out of the house in a chair that looks a little bit like a Doom buggy. Like with the 2003 original, there's a lot of passion for the attraction, and I would even say there's more references to the ride here than before. It's fun to see them even go as far as including a sequence within the stretching room. The script is a lot better, trying to work in a story about a guy going through his grief and his touch to the afterlife. There's a good idea there, though part of me wishes it might have just been about him. The comedy unfortunately falters because of the same problem before. Too much focus on the humans and not enough on the ghosts. Normally I'd be down to watch something with Owen Wilson, Rosario Dawson, Danny DeVito, and Jamie Lee Curtis, but it's hard to justify that many people and to somehow work in the ghost as well. People going into the Haunted Mansion are already read up on the very ghosts synonymous with the attraction, so why has neither movie been that interested in showcasing them? It seems like a miscalculation on what people would like to see. I know horror works because of what you don't know and the monster that lurks, but the point of the ride is to put you within the swinging wake with the other ghosts. There is no mystery, there is no build-up. You don't even need to really know the story because the ghost characters are interesting. It would be like making a Pirates of the Caribbean movie and putting more focus on the character Norrington and his navy, maybe encountering a few pirates. Sure, it might be interesting, but I think people would want to watch pirates for the pirates. Let's see the 999 happy haunts. Having said that, the Haunted Mansion bombed in theaters hard. It was given a weird summer release to ensure that it came out in time for Halloween on the Disney streaming service. First of all, Hocus Pocus also got a summer release back in the 90s, where that too bombed. Second, that put the Haunted Mansion in direct competition with Oppenheimer and Barbie. Oh, and also a genuine horror movie, Talk to Me. It just seemed like the wrong decisions were made regarding its release. Now, here's the more important question. Is it better than the 2003 movie? I think a little bit, thanks to a better idea on what it wanted to be. A family film that was darker. What it needed was a punchier comedic take. As a comedy, I don't remember laughing a lot. Sure, Tiffany Haddish and Lakeith Stanfield occasionally got me, but I was just sitting there waiting for more. I got the feeling that the comedy was more of an afterthought, with the focus more on its atmosphere. The reboot got closer, though I don't think either this or the original properly represents the spirit and nature of the attraction. If you want something that represents the ride the best, I'd say check out Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Welcome to the home of fear and fright, where not all guests survive the night. The lucky souls will live to tell, and those who don't will rot in.
What's the matter with you? You can't say that. This is a family show. What are you doing?
Welcome, foolish Muppets, to tonight's very special Halloween challenge.
We just have to survive the night in this haunted mansion?
Everything here will seem familiar, but your eyes may deceive you.
Whoa.
I'm mysterious, Madame Pagoda.
Wait, stop.
Turn it down. I can't hear myself think.
Take 5, everybody.
Where are you going? No.
Happy Halloween. This place is really haunted.
Fiends, omens, and bogeymen, lend me your fear.
It's showtime. Usually I'm worried about dying up here, but looks like you beat me to it. Don't you have anything better to do than boo me? Tough room. Ooh, indoor lightning. I'm not a shrimp. Close enough. Shaka waka!
If by sunrise you fail this endeavor, then you must remain here forever.
I'm out of here! How did you...
I could just eat you alive.
That's sweet, right?
Muppets Haunted Mansion, streaming exclusively on Disney+.
This was released as a Disney Plus special for Halloween in 2021, completely surprising people that not only wanted a great Muppet story, but also a Haunted Mansion story that truly walked the line between spooky and funny. This version embraced the more campy and whimsical side of the mansion, while also delivering some eerie moments. With Gonzo and Pepe the King Prong as the leads, The special saw them trying to survive a night in the mansion, encountering classic Muppet versions of iconic Haunted Mansion characters. Rolf the dog appeared as the organist, Miss Piggy played the role of Madame Pigota, and Fozzie Bear took on the part of Ghazi the Hatbox Bear, a parody of the legendary Hatbox Ghost. The special also included several celebrity cameos, including Laura Nett as the ghost host, Taraji P. Henson as Constance Hatchaway, and Darren Criss as the graveyard caretaker. Easter eggs from the attraction were abundant, from the stretching room portraits to the doom buggies making an appearance. One of the more fun details was a tribute to the classic breakdown spiel from the ride.
Playful spooks have interrupted our tour. Please remain seated in your doom buggy. We will proceed in just a moment.
This was humorously referenced when the Muppets adventure briefly comes to a halt due to quote-unquote technical issues. There's even a smart story about Gonzo trying to prove himself brave, thinking he won't be liked if he doesn't do his stunts. It's about confronting his inner fears while dealing with the ghost of the mansion. The special was well received for its humor, catchy songs, and faithful tribute to the attraction, blending the spooky and silly in true Haunted Mansion fashion. This to me captures what the ride is going for. If anything, it may even be easier for kids because of the Muppets playing the characters. This has obviously gone into my Halloween lineup. So yeah, it's weird, but I'll admit that the Haunted Mansion special may be my favorite out of the adaptations. So after multiple attempts, has Hollywood truly captured the magic of the Haunted Mansion? While each adaptation has had its strengths, none have quite managed to bottle the same eerie charm and playful spirit that has made the attraction a classic for over 50 years. But maybe that's the beauty of the ride itself. It isn't meant to be confined to a single story or a set of characters. It's an experience, a feeling, an invitation to step into a world where the supernatural is both spooky and welcoming. And no matter how many movies, TV specials, or reinterpretations we get, there will always be something special about stepping through those mansion doors and hearing the ghost host's voice welcoming you to the other side. And with that, let's wrap things up. It's not just about the ghosts or the gags. It's about the experience, the artistry, and the way it invites us into a world where the supernatural feels strangely comforting. Whether you're gliding through the corridors in a doom buggy, humming along to grim grinning ghosts, or revisiting the mansion's many adaptations, it's a reminder of how powerful Disney storytelling can be. It's also a reminder of how one man, Paul Frees, helped shape not just this attraction, but so many of the voices that have become ingrained in our nostalgia. Whether he was welcoming you into the mansion, guiding you through adventure through inner space, or scolding Professor Hingle as Santa Claus in Frosty the Snowman, his talent continues to haunt, enchant us to this day. So as we close the crypt on this episode, I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey through the attraction. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more than you know. And of course, if you have a favorite Haunted Mansion memory or an adaptation, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out on social media or email me at robert@behindthebells.com. Until next time, this has been Behind the Bells, reminding you that there's always room for more than one listener.
Thank you for joining us on this sleigh ride into the magical world of Christmas movies. Check us out for weekly rides into your favorite Christmas classics and their histories. Be sure to give us a positive review on iTunes if you like what you heard. And don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram for updates and special news. Consider subscribing on Patreon in order to help keep the show going and to gain access to some special gifts not available to the public. Merry Monday to all, and to all a good night. See you next week.
Cut. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.